Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about middle childhood, chapter 7. This is mostly first grade through junior high and up to junior high school. So that's what we're talking about right now. Let's go ahead and get started. Excuse me. Height and weight, growth in height and weight during middle childhood slows considerably. African American boys and girls tend to grow faster than white children. The body's failure to produce enough growth hormone leads to growth deficiency. Growth deficiency in this case is a stature below 5 feet. And if you come from a family like I do, that where um, there are undersized people. I'm only 5'6". My mother was only 4'8". My dad was 5'7". 5 feet doesn't seem too small. I have a daughter that's 4'11". So some people are smaller and some people are larger. Normally, the average height for females, I think, is 5'4", and the average height for males is 5'9". I believe that's what it is. Anyway, so that's what they're looking for. Of course, there are some people that are over 7 feet tall, and there are some people that are under 5 feet tall, of course, just like my family. But on the average, of course, that's what they're looking at. Girls and boys remain the same size for most of middle childhood, but girls will begin their prepubertal growth spurt 2 years before boys, about age 9. And then you get situations like this, where even though these two individuals are in the same grade, she is almost a whole head taller than he is. And of course, but they're in the same grade. Um, it will take boys until their adolescence to catch up with the girls of the same age. Makes for some strange dancing at preteen dances, as you see what's going on here. He seems pretty happy about it. I'm not sure how happy she is. Acceptance by peers at this age, often predicated on external appearance and physical competence. Both boys and girls often use advanced maturity as a criteria for selecting friends and leaders. So that is one of the essences of middle childhood, is whether you matured early or not. I can remember, of course, I grew up in Indiana, and Indiana basketball was king. If you could play basketball and you were taller than everybody else and you had muscles more than everybody else did, by golly, you were a star. You were a hero. That all that ended about high school. Our junior high teams. Sometimes we played. We were playing a sixth grade team one time. I wasn't on the team. I was the manager, and they were playing in a sixth grade tournament. And one of the kids on one of the other teams had a mustache, and or the beginnings of a mustache, and he was a lot bigger than everybody else, and he just stood under the basket like Shaquille O'Neal and did whatever he wanted to. It was really hard to get the ball away from him. If he tried to put the ball on the floor, then somebody take it away from him. But as long as he just stood under the basket, he was golden. Um, so there you go. He couldn't camp under there, of course, because of the 3 second rule, but he would move in and out, and it was difficult to beat them. We did beat them somehow. I'm not sure how we did it. Outside shooting, if I remember. This is before the 3-point shot, of course. Greater muscle development as a child ages leads to more and more physical activity. Children will develop bilateral coordination, strength, flexibility, impulsion, speed, precision, balance, and rhythm. This all takes place in middle childhood. And of course, looks like about a 100-yard dash, and this kid was way out ahead of everybody else. Only 3 lanes. That's kind of interesting. Most children at this age try different sports. Most sports give the child an opportunity to develop specific sports skills and life skills that can be applied to everyday life. Sports helps the child develop competence, character, connection, and caring. Children need, on average, about 2,400 calories every day. Breakfast should supply about 25% of the child's total daily calories. Nutritionists recommend plenty of grains, fruits, and vegetables, which are high in natural nutrients. U.S. children tend to eat too much fat, sugar, and low nutrient foods. 17% of school aged children are considered obese. Results in research studies have shown that better nourished children are more energetic, they're less anxious, they show more positive emotion, and they score higher than malnourished children on children's score on a wide range of cognitive measures in middle childhood. So it's a good thing to feed your child well. This is Fahad. This is what he looked like before, and this is what he looked like afterward. As you can see, you could count his ribs. His ears look overly large because his head hasn't kept up with the rest of his body, and here he looks much, much better. Rates of asthma, a chronic illness of the lungs characterized by wheezing, coughing, and shortness of breath, are highest in middle childhood. Children who are at the highest risk of developing asthma are boys, had been low birth weight, have parents who smoke, are poor, and are obese. Asthma may be higher in developed countries because of home interiors and extreme cleanliness. However, in developing countries, air pollution may be the biggest contributor. So the environment has a lot to do with whether the child develops asthma. Extreme cleanliness is not a positive in this case because the child does not become accustomed to the bacteria and the mold and whatnot that is in the environment because of the cleanliness. So when they do come in contact with those things, they can trigger an asthma attack. Another thing is that, and I noticed this when I was wandering around taking care of my grandson in the cold weather. One of the things I noticed was that people they go from their house to their car. They don't put on clothes to stay warm because they don't need to. They're not outside for very long. So these people are just wandering around with not winter clothes on. That's for sure. But when you bounce from one environment to the other, don't go outside very much. This is the kind of thing that can happen to you. The individual can develop some kind of problem, allergies, because they're around things all the time. If they happen to go into a new environment where there are different allergens, then the allergens will trigger an asthma attack or some kind of an allergic attack. Um, Going outside is a positive, is healthy. It's really healthy. And when you don't do it, then somebody's got a problem. Oh, jeez. Sorry, my cat's trying to get out the door. African American children are at a greater risk than other children in the United States for developing asthma, but their parents seem to be the most responsive in creating an environment that avoids asthma triggers. And there you go. Maintaining health and fitness. Exercise promotes health and fitness. Participation in a variety of competitive and recreational sports, for example, tennis, bowling, leads to a lifetime fitness regimen. 15% of boys and 26% of girls do not exercise 3 times a week where they breathe hard or sweat. The sweating part is just amazing to me because I know people that hate sweat, will not sweat, do not want to sweat. If they start to sweat, they stop. And sweating is really healthy. And the reason sweating is healthy is because sweating rids your body of toxins that you've built up. And sweating is a great way to get rid of those toxins. So sweating, that's one of the reasons why the Swedes have their spas where they go into sweat. That's not sweat lodges, of course, but they sweat. And then they go outside and they roll around in the snow, and then they go back and sweat some more. they consider that very healthy, and actually it is healthy. It's a healthy thing to do. Vision and hearing problems. Most children in middle childhood have keener vision than when they were younger. Almost 13% of children under 18 can't see at all or have impaired vision. About 15% of 6 to 19-year-olds, mostly boys, have some hearing loss, as weird as that may seem. Now, as it turns out, and I don't know if we're going to talk about it in this class, but as far as vision is concerned, females tend to have worse vision than males do, as strange as that is. But males have greater hearing loss for some unknown reason. There's a sharp increase in the incidence of myopia in middle childhood. Myopia is another name for nearsightedness. Children, especially in developing countries, tend to have increasing eyesight problems due to poor lighting and an increase in the need to read and write. Two factors leading to poor eyesight in today's culture: genetic predisposition for eyesight problems and increased use of phones and computers, where you have to see small things. 25% of children need glasses. Accidental injuries. Injuries increase between ages 5 and 14 because they're doing crazy stuff. You can see this guy's got staples in his head trying to hold it together. As in early childhood, accidental injuries are a leading cause of death. Parents and children themselves tend to overestimate their safety skills. Protective headgear lowers injuries in activities such as football, roller skating, etc. Boys have far more accidents than girls. 1 in 10 children at this age range suffers from serious emotional disturbances. 13% suffer from anxiety disorders, 2% suffer from severe depression, 5% suffer ADHD, 1 to 4% suffer from conduct disorder, and 0.5% suffer from schizophrenia. Oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD, is a pattern of behavior where a child is uncooperative and hostile towards authority figures. For ODD to be diagnosed, the behavior must interfere with the child's daily life. 15% of school-aged children struggle with ODD, but most grow out of it before they are diagnosed with the more severe conduct disorder. ODD is often comorbid with ADHD, learning disabilities, anxiety disorder, or mood disorders. The concrete operational stage runs from ages 7 to 11 and usually introduces the child to more complex mental operations that will initiate the child into the world of academia. Cognitive advances, understanding of special relationships better. Oh, this is the concrete operational stage. They understand seriation, which means a child can arrange objects in a series based on one or more dimensions, such as weight, lightest to heaviest, or color. They understand the principle of identity, which is part of conservation. They understand reversibility, classification, understanding to reverse classifications. Subtraction becomes possible because before they could only add, they couldn't subtract. Horizontal décollage, they master ideas of conservation of different items at different ages, volumes of liquids, solid measures, and numbers. Children in middle childhood become better at dealing with organization. They understand that there is a difference between a whole and the sum of its parts. This is known as class inclusion. The individual also understands seriation, or the ability to scale objects according to dimension. The efficiency of mental operations is based on an individual's ability to encode, store, and retrieve information. One question is how much information children can handle at a given time. This is a real serious problem for teachers, especially elementary school teachers and junior high teachers. How much information can we give them? Sometimes it seems like we're just overburdening them. And other times it seems like we're not teaching them anything. Every time I pick up my grandson from elementary school, he's in the 3rd grade, I asked him what he learned today, and he said, "Oh, nothing." But I'm sure they're talking about new things. I hope they're talking about new things, so he learns new things. He likes to watch educational programs. One of his favorite shows. He loves animals. One of his favorite shows is a PBS show called Wildcrats, where they talk about animals all over the world and how amazing they are. Rattlesnakes and pangolins and tarsiers and lemurs and just all the animals you can think of, buffalo, whatnot. How quickly and accurately can they process the information? This is another question. Metamemory is understanding the process of memory, understanding how you understand. Information is gathered from our senses and our sensory register and filtered to determine which information the individual is going to allow into their thought processes. Most of our thought takes place in our working memory. The working memory can only hold a limited number of items for a limited period of time. Learning information must take place in a form of permanent storage, the long-term memory. And I've had arguments about this with select students, especially when I was teaching in Ashford and Clinton, Iowa. The question came up, well, why should I learn this? All I need to do is Google it. I'll never be without my telephone. Of course, you don't have cell phone service everywhere, but that evidently they didn't think that was a possibility. Um, and of course, I would hate to have a doctor that had to look everything up every time he did surgery. That would be kind of interesting. But they claimed that they didn't have to learn anything, and I tried to convince them that they did. Not sure how successful I was. When children first start school, they have to develop the ability to tune out distracting stimulation and focus on a particular task. This is known as selective attention. A second grader may have trouble concentrating on a task if there is music playing, but by the sixth grade, the child won't be bothered by the music, so they can do two things at one time. When a child starts school, they begin organizing their recurring processes and their memories as scripts that they can repeat when needed. Toothbrushing script, the button close script, zipping up your clothes script, tying your shoes script, sitting quietly when at school script, doing math at math time script. All these are scripts that the child has to master. Most people think that they live in Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and the children are above average. At least that is how parents think of their children. That is why intelligence tests are tolerated in the United States, because it tells me that my child is above average. That's what everybody's hoping for. Lake Wobegon was a program, Prairie Home Companion. It used to be on the radio. Garrison Keillor as the one that wrote it, and Lake Wobegon was a major part of that. He was on the radio for about 20 years, every Saturday afternoon. Fascinating stuff. He was from Lake Wobegon, and he'd get a letter from Lake Wobegon and talk about what was going on there, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. And that's how he would introduce Lake Wobegon to everybody. The significant rise in IQ scores during the 20th century is known as the Flynn effect, and this is James Flynn right here. That's what he looks like. 1999, James Flynn recognized that the median IQ score had increased from 1932 till 1997 by as much as 20 points. The rise is thought to be from environmental causes such as better prenatal care, smaller families with fewer children competing for resources, attending preschool, and even watching educational children's programming. But the most likely and influential reason for the rise in IQ scores is the decline of the infectious diseases, which drains the body of energy that is needed for physical and cognitive growth. And that's one of the things we were talking about last week. We were talking about immunizations. And one of the reasons that people are immunized is to combat the childhood illnesses, measles, mumps, and chickenpox. Um, fifth disease, there's a couple others, fifth disease and whatnot. But people are having much smaller families, and for that reason, if you've got 9 kids in the family and you only have so much food, who gets the food, or does everybody get the same amount? I can remember when I was growing up, there were 6 of us, 6 children anyway, and there were two parents. Um, how do you feed steak to 8 people? And what my mother used to do, she used to fry up. She used to buy the cheapest cut of steak that she could, and then she cut it in strips, and she cut it in 8 strips, of course, and everybody, or she actually cut it in 7 strips, because she wasn't much of a meat eater, but she cut it in 7 strips, and each of us got 1/7 of the steak. When she bought pork chops, she had to buy one for everybody. You can't cut pork chops, and I guess you could, but she would make sure we had a pork chop for everybody. Um, chicken. Everybody had their own piece of the chicken that they ate. My dad and I got a breast. We each got breasts. I have 2 brothers that got thighs. I had 2 brothers, or a brother and a sister that got the legs. And that was it. That was pretty much the chicken. My dad got a breast, and I got a breast. My mother, if there was anything left over, she got all the, certainly any vegetables that were left over. She always cooked enough. When you cook green beans, cooking enough for 8 people takes 3 or 4 cans every time you cook. Anyway, and I can see this. I can see how smaller families, everybody would get their food. I can remember the first time I ever ate over at somebody else's house with a smaller family than mine. I was really surprised that people left food on their plates, because we never did. Not at my house. Anyway, so the smaller family thing is very real. The field of writing psychological tests is known as psychometrics, and the people who specialize in developing psychological tests are called psychometricians. Psychometricians from the past have developed tests for studying many areas of psychology, but the most controversial tests have been the tests that measure intelligence, and of course, that's what Flynn was talking about. And this became quite controversial. If we're talking about the people that developed the IQ tests, uh, Binet from France brought the French IQ test over here in 1913. He adapted it. He and Stanford University adapted it for American children, and that's why it's called the Stanford Binet. About 10 years later, Wechsler put together an IQ test. I think they're on Wechsler 2 by this. I think they're on Wechsler 2, if not Wechsler 3. Anyway, we've had 2 major IQ tests. And of course, when we're talking about intelligence, we used to just talk about general intelligence. That's what the Wechsler measures, and that's what the Stanford Binet measures. And then up comes in 1983 Howard Gardner from Harvard University began expanding the understanding of intelligence. He claimed, no, that general intelligence is something, but the reality is you can have geniuses in a lot of different areas. Um, he felt that it came in many forms, and some of those forms include linguistic intelligence. I mean, some people are writers and some people aren't writers. Uh, this is knowing the meaning of words, having the ability to use words to understand new ideas, and using language to convey ideas to others. This is linguistic intelligence. And he considered linguistic intelligence a form of genius. Logical mathematical intelligence. This is my son. He's especially good at mathematics. All this stuff would make sense to him, not to me, by golly. Understanding relations that exist among objects, actions, and ideas, as well as the logical mathematical operations that can be performed on them. And of course, he lives in his own little mathematics world. Really interesting fella. Having a conversation with him. Spatial intelligence, perceiving objects accurately and imaging in the mind's eye the appearance of an object before and after it has been transformed. And of course, this is one of the things. This is the type of genius that an engineer would have. He would be able to imagine what something will look like before it happens. Musical intelligence, comprehending and producing sounds varying in pitch, rhythm, and emotional tone. Uh, they called, well, just about all your composers are considered musical geniuses. Mozart, Brahms, Haydn, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Chopin. All of these individuals were able to do things with music from a very young age. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence, using one's body in highly differentiated ways as dancers, craftspeople, and athletes do. Interpersonal intelligence, identifying different feelings, moods, motivations, and intentions in others. Of course, this is what psychologists are supposed to have, this type of at least knowledge, if not genius. Uh, but I'm sure there are people out there who would be considered interpersonal geniuses. Intrapersonal intelligence, understanding one's emotions and knowing one's strengths and weaknesses. This one I've never been able to figure out myself. I guess I'm not too bright. In 1999, Gardner added naturalistic intelligence, recognizing and distinguishing among members of a group, species, and describing relations between such groups. Some people have this capability. They refer to it as having a green thumb. I have my son's fiance is seems to have this understanding of plants and whatnot. Gardner's latest addition to his intelligences was existentialist intelligence in 2002, considering ultimate issues such as purpose of life and the nature of death. And of course, right now we're debating global warming, and people keep saying that energy and global warming is a existential threat. And like half the population doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. Um, we're born, we live, and then we die. One idea is that people don't ever think about um, their existence and the existence beyond my life. But existentialism, of course, the whole idea of existential intelligence is that we can perceive what comes next. Gardner based much of his theorizing on the research being done with savants, individuals with mental deficits who showed extreme intelligence in one or more domains. And here is a video dealing with that.
Qatar Airways, taking you on a journey with Quest.
The Public Library in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's often said that the mind works in mysterious ways. In the case of 55-year-old Kim Peek, this is truer than most. He's the world's most famous savant, a confounding mix of mental disability and brilliance.
My zip code, where I used to live, was 10003. Where is that apartment?
Lower East Side. Lower East Side.
My office is at 30303. Where is that?
Atlanta.
Kim's remarkable brain became the real-life inspiration for the character of Raymond Barrett in the movie Rayman.
Sally Gibbs is Sally. 461-0192.
How did you know my phone number?
Should read the telephone book last night. Gibbs Sally. 461-0192.
It's a role that earned Dustin Hoffman an Oscar and brought worldwide attention to the phenomenon of the so-called idiot
Destin walked up to Kim after he'd spent about 6 hours with us in Hollywood, and he touched noses with him, and he says, "Kim, I may be the star, but you're the heavens."
I was born on March the 9th, 1962.
was a Friday.
Kim was born with severe brain damage, but with his disability came an astonishing gift, a photographic memory. Like other savants, the mechanism of his condition is poorly understood.
Kim brain, no left brain, no right brain. He has one hemisphere, doesn't have any separation, and total absence of the corpus callosum, which has to be a filtering system, and he has no filtering system. So instead of 45% or 50% that yours and my brain keeps, he keeps in about 98%.
Against all the odds, Kim Peek learned to read. Books and the unquenchable thirst for knowledge came to dominate his world.
Last president of the Soviet Union was who?
Gorbachev.
Longest serving leader of the Soviet Union.
Stalin.
This is hard. Identify the famous son of Pepin the Short.
Karloman.
The City Library is Kim Peek's second home, and for good reason. He's already read about 9,000 books. Luckily, the library has 600,000, so it should keep him busy for some time to come.
Interesting, fascinating. Let's try Derek.
When Derek Paravicini is playing the piano, it's hard to believe there's anything he can't do. And yet, when you meet him away from the keyboard, as we first did in London 6 years ago, the contrast is shocking.
Can you hold up 3 fingers for me?
I can do that.
Can you hold up 3?
I don't know how to do it.
You want me to show you 3?
Yes, please,
Okay.
yes.
Derek is a musical savant, blessed with an island of extreme talent in a sea of profound disability. Derek was excited to show us the skills that make him so exceptional. His ability to instantly call up any piece of music he has ever heard, like YMCA.
Can you play that one?
Can play YMCA.
And I asked him to play a show tune. But it isn't just that Derek remembers them. He can transform them effortlessly and seamlessly into the styles of different musicians, like jazz greats.
Switch to Oscar Peterson. How's about Dave Brubeck?
It's like he's got libraries of pieces and styles in his head.
Adam Ockleford is Derek's teacher.
He can just whip out a piece book and a style book and just bring them together. It just kind of explodes.
There you go, savants. They do exist, obviously. They do exist. Children will have a fairly extensive vocabulary by the time they begin school. School will allow them to use language to analyze, study, and understand language, meta and linguistic awareness. Children will begin using figurative language forms as they delve deeper and deeper into academics, similes, proverbs, idioms, metaphors. Some elementary schools offer a second language, which includes proper grammar as well as vocabulary, and this is school bilingualism. Children usually learn to read when they enter school at age 6 or 7. Reading requires direct instructions and the ability to learn symbols and understand meaning. The two main approaches to reading are phonics and whole language. The phonics approach advocates children to read by breaking down wording into their sound components and then putting them together into words. For the whole language approach, the emphasis should be on the meaning of written language in whole passages so that the children can guess at the meaning of words based on the context. The approach that works best appears to be a combination of the two approaches, beginning with phonics and later supplementing with the whole language approach. Most children become able readers by the third grade, but some suffer from conditions such as dyslexia, which includes difficulty sounding out letters, difficulty learning to spell words, and a tendency to misperceive the order of letters in words. Other children have difficulty reading due to a range of learning disabilities, which are cognitive disorders that impede the development of learning a specific skill, such as reading or math. Positive effects of peer relations. They develop skills needed for sociability and intimacy. They enhance relationships. They gain a sense of belonging that helps them make independent judgments. Negative effects of peer relations. A child is expected to accept a group's values and behavioral norms, even if undesirable, and children may not be able to resist. The peer group may reinforce prejudice, and that, of course, is a terrible, terrible thing. School-age children develop an organizational order with the peer groups that develop a social hierarchy. This ranking is based on how much a child is disliked or liked by others. Children will construct their own self-image and self-concept on how they are treated by their peers. Most school-age children consider themselves average in their ratings to others. Most children are well aware of who are the neglected and rejected children in their peer group. Popularity, peer relationships in middle childhood leads to later social adjustment. Popular children have good cognitive abilities, are high achievers, are good at solving social problems, help other children, are assertive without being disruptive or aggressive. Really a fascinating picture here, and for some reason I've lost my arrow. Wait a second. This is a really interesting picture. If we look at this picture, of course, one of these kids we can't see. We can see this kid. There's two children sitting down, and these are the two leaders of the group. How do we know that? We know that because everything is focused on these two guys. This kid's looking at him, this kid's performing for him, and this kid is looking to make sure that he's doing the right thing. It's these two children right here, this African-American child and this kid with knee pads on. They are the leaders of the group, the two leaders of the group, and I couldn't say which one is the leader. I'm guessing it's the African-American child. He's larger. For one thing, he's larger, and this kid seems to be performing for him, and this kid is looking on to see what his reaction is. Fascinating picture. Unpopularity. Children can be unpopular for many reasons. Being overly aggressive, being hyperactive, being withdrawn, acting silly and immature, acting anxious and uncertain, may be insensitive to others' feelings. They may not adapt well to new situations. They may show undue interest in the opposite sex, which is always off-putting. They may expect not to be liked. Self-fulfilling prophecy. The neglected child. Neglected children are those children who are ignored to the point of invisibility in their class. If you think back to your high school years, you may know one of the children that was neglected. You may not remember their names because you sat in school with them for an extended length of time, but they made such a little impression on people that nobody can remember who they were. Neglected children often have trouble making friends due to unsureness in the communication with peers and adults and high scores on inhibition. This makes it difficult for them to interact with peers and adults, and they don't develop the same social friendship skills as their peers. Other studies have found that less talkative children are viewed as less approachable by peers and are seen as less desirable social partners by the time they reach upper primary school grades. Many studies have found that this rejection is in part triggered by adults' responses to the child. And of course, what we're talking about is the teacher's reaction to these children. They ignore them. They are the ones that lead the class into neglecting these children. Rejected is the term generally used to describe those children who are actively disliked by their peers. In sociometric observations, rejected children were those who received lots of negative and not many positive friendship nominations from their peers. There is some evidence to suggest that parenting styles, rather than berserk pituitary glands, have an influence on the development of children's friendship skills. Children that are hostile and aggressive in their approaches to peers have often had similar behavior modeled at home. So we're talking about bullies. Selman stages of friendship. Stage 0, age 3 to 7, momentary playmateship. It's undifferentiated level of friendship. Children are egocentric and have difficulty considering another person's point of view. They only think about what they want from their relationship. Friends are defined by closeness, material attributes, and physical attributes. And here is an example. Sally Ann and Jilly. Sally Ann is Jilly's bestest friend as long as she does what Jilly wants her to do. Sally Ann has the prettiest clothes, so Jilly likes her. Sally Ann has a Powderpuff Girls game station game, so Jilly likes her more. Stage 1, age 4 to 9, one-way assistance. On this unilateral level, a good friend does what a child wants the friend to do. Doing things together is a momentary thing. Their friends tend to be whomever they are playing with at the time. An example, Jeannie likes Joy because Joy doesn't like purple, so they don't have to fight over Jeannie's favorite doll dresses. Sometimes Joy isn't Jeannie's friend because she won't play makeup with her mom's stuff. And that's stage 1. Stage 2, 4 to 12, two-way fair weather cooperation. Friendship involves give and take, but it also serves separate self-interests rather than common mutual interests to both parties. Sharing is an important component. A friendship is more than being thrown together. Personalities have to mesh. Must share ideas, feelings, and interests, and that makes them friends. Jeannie and Tia are always together. Sometimes they have little tiffs, and secretly Tia says that she would rather be best friends with Gloria, but Gloria is best friends with her next-door neighbor. Tia and Jeannie always find each other to make sure that neither one is alone. And that has to do with friendship, never being alone. Stage 3, ages 9 to 15, intimate, mutually shared relationships. Children now view friendship as having a life of its own. It is an ongoing, systematic, committed relationship that incorporates more than just doing things for each other. It is something treasured, and parties become possessive and often demand exclusivity. Girls tend to have 1 or 2 intimate friends. Boys have more or less intimate friends. Girls are better at it than boys are. There's a shock for you. Melissa and Maya have been friends since starting school, and they have grown into being best friends. They sometimes argue, but not for long. In the 6th grade, Maya started getting pressure from her community to find an Asian friend, but both girls made sure that this conflict did not end their friendship. Now they discuss clothes and boyfriends only with each other. Maya has Asian friends, but not friends she can discuss relationships with. Self-esteem, Erikson's 4th crisis begins as the child enters school and starts comparing themselves with their peers. And of course, the 4th stage is industry versus inferiority. Conflict of competence is the task. A view of the self is able to master skills and complete tasks is the crisis resolution. Children rate physical appearance most important. Self-esteem is second in importance. Self-acceptance is third. Social support from parents and classmates, friends, and teachers is also important. Divorce was very difficult throughout American history until the 1960s. If you got married forever, no matter how well you liked each other. People who should have divorced decades before suddenly saw light at the end of the tunnel. This was in the 1960s. There was a glut of divorces that peaked in the 1980s. So they legalized divorce in the 1960s in almost all states. And by the 1980s, it looked like people were never going to be married again because so many people had gotten a divorce. This is the first wave, of course. All those people that should have divorced long before didn't. In the 1990s, nearly half of all North American children experienced their parents getting a divorce. This is very distressing for children. Almost all studies show that no matter what the age of the child when their parents divorce, it is disruptive to their well-being. And of course, this is a picture of a wedding, of a divorce cake, actually. When the divorce laws in the United States were liberalized in the 1960s, the devastation for children was quite profound. As time went by, the impact on children lessened. It is speculated that this is because the prospect of divorce became more commonplace and society accepted this outcome. An example of this, I was divorced in the 1970s twice. When I was growing up in the 1950s, I started school in 1955. When I started school, in my class, there was only one family. There was only one child in our in my class. We had the largest class in the school. There was only one family. There was only one couple that was divorced in the whole town where I lived, and it was a Methodist town. And of course, Methodists aren't that strict about divorce, but it was illegal. I mean, you had to go to Reno in order to get a divorce. Nevada's the only state that gave you a divorce, an uncontested divorce. You could get divorced in New York State, but somebody had to have had an affair with somebody else, and they had to admit it in court, as weird as that sounds. So it was almost impossible until the 1960s into the 1970s. And like I said, I only knew one person who came from a broken home, but I knew a lot of parents that should have been divorced. That's for sure. They were not happy with one another. In the 1990s, the outcomes turned negative again as the incomes for single parents became lower. As the children age into adulthood, the products of divorced relationships tend to have more conflict in their own relationships and are more likely to end up in divorce. And what happened in the 1960s and 1970s, the father had to pay child support and alimony. Alimony in most states had alimony. So the father was paying through the nose to get a divorce, not to be married to somebody. And he also had to pay child support. But he had to pay this lady not to work and to take care of the children, as interesting as that was. In the 1990s, things changed. They changed the divorce laws. Alimony in most states was limited to 2 or 3 years. And so things went south again. Negative things started happening with divorce. For a child, the first year after the divorce is the toughest, of course, but by the second year, they tend to adjust to the new circumstance. Children adjust better to divorce if the parents can cooperate with one another, especially on disciplinary matters. Joint custody is the best outcome for the children, though this doesn't always occur. The younger they are, the better off they are, actually. If they are As they get older, it's more and more difficult because they've lived with both parents for a longer period of time. Divorce and child development, the absence of a role model and a source of parental support can lead to problems. Single parents tend to have economic problems that they didn't have when married. Conflict between parents is extremely distressing to the children involved. Many of the problems with divorce are seen in children who just experience the conflict without the divorce. Which children are the most affected by divorce? So the child who focuses on negative events will suffer greater trauma from a divorce. Children who can handle the threat of divorce will actually be stronger in the long run for dealing with the trauma. Parents can help their children adjust to a divorce situation by not competing with each other. Criticizing their ex-spouse should never be done in front of the children. Children should never be used to mediate disputes between warring spouses. Between 1970 and 1996, the proportion of children under 18 years of age living with one parent grew from 12% to 28%. The rate of marriages is 0.4% per capita. The divorce rate is 0.41% per capita per year. Adjusting to divorce generally involves 6 tasks: acknowledging the reality of the marital rupture, disengaging from parental conflict and distress and resuming customary pursuits, resolving loss of the parent they aren't living with, security and feeling loved and cared for by both parents, familiar daily routines, family traditions, resolving anger and self-blame, accepting the permanence of divorce, achieving realistic hope for their own intimate relationships. And this is the toughest part. Accepting the resolving anger and self-blame. A lot of kids blame themselves for their parents getting a divorce. Rarely is that the case. Children rarely have anything to do with why the parents got a divorce. Usually has to do with the number one problem in marriages is money. And the second most important problem that people have has to do with sex, as curious as that is. Children do better when the father pays child support. This shows that the father is more involved. The frequency of contact is not as important as the quality of the parent-child relationship. Children who do not enjoy a good relationship with their non-custodial father tend to have behavioral problems. Influences on adjustment to age or maturity, gender, temperament, psychological and social adjustment. The parent must handle the following issues delicately: custody and visitation arrangements, finances, reorganization of household duties, contact with the non-custodial parent, remarriage, and child's relationship with a step-parent. Younger children are more anxious about divorce. They have less realistic perceptions of what caused it. They're more likely to blame themselves. They may adapt more quickly than older children. They fear abandonment and rejection. School-age children, sensitive to parental pressures and loyalty conflicts, they fear abandonment and rejection as well. Boys usually find it harder to adjust than girls do. This may depend largely on how involved the father is with his family. In most cases, the mother is awarded custody of the children. Total custodial mothers, 11,268,000, that's about 80%. And total custodial fathers, 2,907,000, that's about 20% of children of divorce. Custodial mothers who receive a support award, about 79.6%. Custodial fathers who receive a support award, only 29.9%. Non-custodial mothers who totally default on support, 46.9%. Non-custodial fathers who totally default on support, 26.9%. Involvement of the non-custodial parent: the more recent the separation, the closer the father lives to his children. The higher the socioeconomic status, the more likely the father will be involved. The non-custodial father is more likely to lose contact if he has biological children from a new marriage. Non-custodial mothers keep twice as much contact as non-custodial fathers and are less likely to break contact after remarriage. The number of single-parent families has quadrupled since 1960. A child today has at least a 50% chance living with only one parent at some time during their lives. In 1998, one-parent families comprised almost one-third of all U.S. families with children under 18. Unwed mothers create more single-parent families than divorce does. One of every 3 children born is born to an unwed mother. In 1998, 4 out of 10 children who lived with a single mother lived with a mother who had never been married. 4 out of 10. In 2004, over a quarter of births of women ages 25 to 29, 27.8%, and over half of births of women ages 20 to 28, 54.8%, were unmarried women. Birth rates for unmarried women, 52.5 births per 1,000. Unmarried women aged 15 to 44%. Of all births to unmarried women, about 41%. In 2020, the state with the highest percentage of births to teenagers was Mississippi, with 54.2%. The state with the lowest was Utah, with 19.2%. Arizona had a percentage of 45.2%. New Mexico had a percentage of 51.5%. 75% of divorced mothers and 80% of divorced fathers remarry. 86% of children in remarriages live with their biological mother and stepfather. Sometimes loyalty to the absent parent interferes with forming ties to the step-parent. The more children involved, the more difficult the adjustment. Boys seem to do better in step-parent situations than in single mother situations. Girls do worse with a new stepfather and have a harder time adjusting. Most children adjust reasonably well. Children of divorce are twice as likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to marry young and develop an unstable, unsatisfying relationship. Children from fatherless homes accounts for 63% of youth suicides, 71% of pregnant teenagers, 90% of all homeless and runaway children, 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions, 85% of all children that exhibit behavioral disorders, 80% of rapists motivated with displaced anger, 71% of all high school dropouts, 75% of all 75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers, and 85% of all youths sitting in prison are children from fatherless homes. And here we go. More funny pictures. Cake. She knocked him down the the cake, and he's bleeding to death, it looks like. Divorce, she got half. Cut his car in half. That's funny. Hooters. Maybe that's why he got a divorce. He had a Hooters sticker on his car. When a single mother remarries, there are some interesting problems. Boys benefit from having a father figure around. Girls tend to adjust poorly because of the disruption of their relationship with their mother. Adolescents tend to challenge the new step-parent. When the father is a custodial parent and he remarries, he has problems as well. Often fathers are awarded custody of male children of a male child because they already have problems. Males adjust poorly to the new relationship because they have lost the exclusive attention of their father. Girls tend to do better. Over time, things tend to work out in blended families. Unfortunately, second marriages have a greater probability of ending in divorce. Then the children must just have to go through the same traumas again. Bullying may be defined as a systematic abuse of power, relationships, and social groups. Over the past 2 decades, research has shown that bullying is a serious problem that has far-reaching effects on both the perpetrators and the victims. The short-term effects of bullying can be quite dramatic. Research has shown that low self-esteem and stress due to bullying can lead to problems with concentration and problem solving. Research also indicates that students who were bullied were more likely to skip school, found it difficult to sleep, and felt ill. Long-term problems that can arise from exposure to bullying include low self-esteem, depressive disorders, difficulty in establishing and maintaining relationships with the opposite sex, in extreme cases, death by suicide. The bully, on the other hand, has a greater likelihood of going on to commit more serious crimes later in life. And that is the end of the chapter. So I hope everybody has a good break, or had a good break, or whenever you read this. And I'll see you next week.